In today's video, I'm going to give you tips for starting your journey in astrophotography based on my 12 years experience of taking equipment out into my back garden and imaging the night sky. Tip number one is narrow down your interest, because there are various different types of astrophotography and each benefits from different types of equipment and different imaging techniques. For example, you could have landscape astrophotography where you use a DSLR or mirrorless camera on a tripod with a trigger release and to take photos of the Milky Way with foreground interest, you know, maybe a windmill or a mountain or someone looking wishfully at the universe. But that's very different to capturing deep sky objects like galaxies and nebulae, and that itself is very different to capturing planets and the moon, and the equipment you use for each is quite different. My recommendation is try not to do it all, pick what most interests you to begin with and choose that equipment for that niche of astrophotography. My second tip is look at focal length. And this is really important. If you're doing landscape astrophotography on a tripod, you probably want quite a wide field lens, like, I don't know, maybe a 28mm lens, maybe a 14mm lens, something really wide that's going to give you a large bit of the sky, and also something that's not going to show up the Earth's rotation on longer exposures. Like if you zoom really far in with a long zoom lens, it's going to pick out any of that Earth's rotation. You're going to see the stars trail. If you're doing planetary and lunar, it's the opposite. You want a really long focal length to give you some image scale on these tiny little objects in the sky. They're tiny, but they're very bright, which means you can capture them on very short exposures. So you don't need a very accurate tracking mount to capture the planets and the moon, like you do with other types of astrophotography. And you can capture lots of frames, stack them together, bring out more detail. It's very different to when you're doing deep sky astrophotography of like the galaxies and the nebulae, where you know you're going to be taking long exposures to capture enough light from these faint objects, and these objects are actually surprisingly larger in the sky than the planets. You'd be surprised how big some of them are. Like for example, Andromeda's something like 6 or 8 times the size of the moon in the sky. Some of these objects are pretty big. So you want a short focal length ideally to start out with to capture some of these deep sky objects, but not just because it allows you to capture enough of space to frame the object. It's also really important for how accurately you can track the sky. Some people start out trying to image the night sky, galaxies and nebulae with something like an 8-inch SCT, and that's got 2032mm of focal length at f10, and you can reduce it down to f7 at about 1400mm, but it's still really long focal length for deep sky imaging. And the problem with that is you need a very heavy duty, very accurate equatorial mount to be able to track accurately enough to image that focal length. Because just imagine if you're holding your arm out like that, you can keep your finger still, but if I increase that focal length by holding a pull cue, then it's going to be harder to keep the end of that pull cue still, and that's exactly how focal length behaves. You're effectively zooming in further, so any little error gets amplified. So I'd recommend, if you're deep sky imaging, to start out with something like a short ED refractor on an equatorial mount. You need an equatorial mount for these long exposures because it allows you to accurately track with the rotation of the Earth and counteract it. You can get alt-azimuth go-to mounts, and they're okay for about 20 seconds worth of exposure before the field rotation kicks in. So that they're okay for like planetary imaging and for short exposure deep sky objects, like if you want to capture some of the brighter objects. But once you get to like the fainter objects, you're going to need longer and longer exposures. So I'd recommend an equatorial mount if you want to get into more of the galaxies and nebulae, capturing those kind of objects, definitely. Right, what's next on my magic list that I've written on my daughter's notebook? Right, bigger isn't always better. Okay, yeah. Now, for visual astronomy, having a really big mirror or lens allows you to capture more light and see faint deep sky objects more clearly and more detail on the planets and the moon. But you don't need that for example, deep sky imaging, because you're taking longer exposures. It's all about matching the focal length of the telescope to the pixels and the size of the sensor. If you start off with deep sky imaging, for example, and you get an 8-inch Newtonian, you're going to need a pretty hefty equatorial mount to put that on, and then it's going to get buffeted around in the wind. I think you're just going to have a more easier time if you get a short tube refractor or a long lens, or a smaller Newtonian like a 130 PDS by Skywatch, for example. But try and keep the focal length shorter if you're new to astrophotography, because it does make life a lot easier. But if you're doing Planetary and Lunar, the long focal length and the big apertures does help to bring out more detail in those objects and more image scale. So it does depend on what kind of imaging you're doing. And as said, if you're observing, then you need a big light bucket if you want to see some of these faint deep sky objects from dark skies. Now, the mount is number one consideration. And yeah, like if you've got a budget of X amount and you want to do deep sky astrophotography of galaxies and nebulae, put most of that budget into the mount, because that is the thing that's going to ensure the sharpest images and the easier life with astrophotography. I started out in about 2011, 2012, taking out a EQ3 with a motor drive kit into the back garden, and the best I could manage, no matter what I tried, was about 30-second exposures, and that became limiting very quickly. When I moved up to an HEQ5, I was shocked by how easy it was to capture deep sky objects up to like 2 minutes unguided with the same setup. And then adding guiding just got even better. But yeah, if you skimp on the mount, basically, you're going to have a hard time. It's the most important part of the puzzle for deep sky imaging. If you're doing landscape shots, tripod and trigger release is fine. And if you're doing Planetary Lunar, a motor-driven out-azimuth mount, like a go-to out-azimuth mount's fine, or basic motor drives on a EQ mount is fine. But for Planetary and Lunar, you're capturing lots of short exposures. You don't need the accurate tracking. For the deep sky imaging of the faint galaxies and nebulae, you need to be very accurate and have auto-guiding capabilities, and you need a really good mount to do that. So don't skimp on the mount. It's the number one bit to put your money into for deep sky imaging. Okay, running before you can walk. Yeah, okay, I see this quite a bit on the help desk where I work at First Optics. I get asked, they've always wanted to give astrophotography a go, and they're like, can you sort me out, write me a wish list? I want a big telescope mount, I want auto guider, I want electronic autofocuser, I want a filter wheel, mono camera with RGB filters and narrowband filters, the whole shebang. And sometimes I ask them, what's your background? You know, where are you at with your sort of astrophotography journey? And they've always wanted to give it a go, but they've never given it a go. And that's an alarm bell for me, because if you buy £5 worth of equipment and you've never done astrophotography before, you're going to have one hell of a learning curve ahead of you. My sincere advice is to just build it in steps. Like start off, for example, with a camera and lens on a star tracker, or maybe like a Star Adventure GTI, and build up the focal length, then add auto guiding so you can track accurately at the longer focal length. Then go into, you know, start with like a one-shot colour camera, like a DSLR or a mirrorless camera for capturing galaxies. You can mod them, remove the filter if you want to capture more of the nebulae, or you can move to a one-shot colour deep sky camera. But going straight into mono, not only is there more to think about and more to sort of go wrong on the night, there's also the post-processing. It can be post-processing lots of different layers and merging them, and you've got to think about the learning curve of the post-processing as well. And I can feel the hate comments from all those mono imagers out there, but I really do believe one-shot colour is the way for beginners to get into this hobby. I don't think I think mono imaging is like the pinnacle of image quality, but I strongly believe you should learn the ropes and start off with a DSLR, then work your way up to it. Because just going straight into mono imaging with filter wheels and with everything, loads of cables everywhere, different softwares and everything, it's a lot for someone who's never done astrophotography before to wrap your head around. And I can just imagine the frustration of going out night after night and not getting it all to work. And part of the fun of astrophotography is sort of progressing your own journey, progressing through it and getting better and better. What's the fun in starting out with all the equipment, all the best equipment, and not having a clue how to use it? Start with something that we can manage as we're learning and build upon it. That's my advice for that one. Right, start with easy targets. Again, like planets and the moon, you can see those, quite easy to find them and focus them. You don't need a go-to mount even. You can even image them with like a Dobsonian and just, use a planetary camera and let it drift across the field of view with the Earth's rotation, and then just nudge it back, film it again, and stitch those movies together and image it that way. But yeah, deep sky object easy targets are things like very bright, large deep sky objects like the Great Orion Nebula, Andromeda, Hercules cluster. You guys down in the southern hemisphere, you've got some wonderful bright objects as well. But don't go after like the really faint, obscure ones straight away. I'd recommend you look for the easy to find targets and the ones that are bright, that are going to take the shortest amount of exposure time to bring out the detail, and then work your way from there. Okie dokie. Right, what we got next? Plan imaging sessions, and that's a little bit like my previous point by starting with easy targets. So if you're looking for targets to image, use something like Stellarium on your laptop or your phone to look at what's up in the night sky that night, where it's positioned, where, if there's going to be obstructions in your garden, because it might be behind your house or behind a tree, the object you want to image. Also, you can see how that object's going to be framed with the telescope or lens that you're going to be using, and see whether it's going to look suitable or not for your setup. So it's a good idea to have a little quick look on Stellarium or similar Sky Safari app or something like that, just to have a look, scout out possible targets that you'd like to image. Okie doke, what we got next? Plan every session. Don't sweat mistakes. Yeah, this is the thing with astrophotography. Like, if you look at social media, you'll just see loads of amazing pictures, and if you start astrophotography, you'll think, mine doesn't look like that. But the thing is, these people that are taking amazing images have been doing, a lot of them have probably been doing it for years, and if they've not been doing it for years, they're just very gifted. It's a real long learning curve, learning every aspect that's involved in imaging. And just, I would go in with the mindset of improve relative to your previous image. Like, your first image will be rubbish, and that's fine. I won't even show you, I don't even think I've got my first image no more, but it was appalling. Yeah, really bad. And maybe my fifth image wasn't even that good either, to be honest. Just compare yourself to yourself and not to other people, I think, is what I'm trying to say, because there's some amazing images out there, but it's taken years of experience and people building up equipment over years and refining techniques. You can't run before you can walk in this hobby. It's just too rich and technical. And that brings me on to another point, and this is kind of for like 2024. If you're not technically minded, there is another type of imaging now that you can do, and that's smart telescope imaging. And these are fully integrated systems that you just plonk down, connect to your phone, press a few buttons, and it will go to an object, focus, start live stacking a picture of that object, and then you can share it with your friends. And I think that's a really good way to go if you're really daunted by the technical side of the hobby of astrophotography. For some people, it's all about overcoming the problem solving, and you know, getting things to work with each other, cobbling different equipment together and just sort of putting an imaging rig together and problem solving it. And for others, they just want to capture a pretty picture of the night sky. And there's nothing wrong with using a smart telescope. It's not cheating, I don't think. They're great for outreach, and they're great if you're kind of not technically minded, but you still want to get outside for yourself and capture images for yourself rather than look at them on the internet that other people have taken. Because at least you've gone out there and done it for yourself, even if the process of capturing it is made easy for you by the smart telescope. The smart telescopes nowadays include like the Dwarf Labs Dwarf 2, there's the Sea Stars by ZWO, and Veronis Vespera. Those are the three that I'd look at the moment. Okay, what we got next? Focus, yeah. Like when you get outside, no matter what object you're imaging, whether it's a landscape or a planet or a deep sky object, focus is so critical. Take your time with focus, because there's nothing worse than getting all your data, zooming in on it and seeing that the focus is missed, because you can solve a lot of problems in post-processing, but there's nothing you can do about bad focus, or very little you can do about bad focus. You've just got a soft, mushy image and there's nothing you can do about it. If you nail focus and check your focus during the night, make sure it's not moving, then and just keep it focused, then your image is going to be lovely and sharp, and you'll see more detail and they will look better. And you can use things like focus masks, Bahtinov masks, to help you. And some programs have like things like the ASI Air as a section for focus, where as you're focusing, you have to get the number as high or low as possible, and then you know you've got good focus. Also, just take your time with it, but also check throughout the night. Unless you've got an autofocus, so keeping an eye on it, like the expansion of the optics and changing temperatures and things like that can and focus a slip can cause your focus to go out. Focus, don't skimp on it. Take your time, make sure the focus is good. Right, what we got next? I can't even read my handwriting. That looks like get laid, but it can't be. Get hands on. Oh, it's an H. Get hands on. Yeah, there's only so, it's great. Go on the internet, go on YouTube, watch videos and things like that. Go on forums, but there's no substitute for getting out there with the equipment and giving it a go. Even if it's like a practice run, if you've got an equatorial mount, practice balancing the telescope on the right ascension and declination axis, practice polar aligning, practice the steps you need to set up, and you'll have more success, and you'll be less kerfuffled on the night when you notice it's clear outside and you're rushing out to set up. If I regularly image, I'm a lot more slick. I get everything done without a problem. If it's been a while since I've done a certain type of imaging, for example, if I've been out the front, I've been imaging planets for months and months, and then I fancy deep sky imaging, so I'll go out the back where it's better for deep sky imaging, away from all the light pollution at the front. And I'll go out the back, and if I've not done deep sky imaging for a while, I will make mistakes, and I've been doing this for years and years. I'll admit, I've wondered why I can't get focus, can't see a star, and I look and I've got the bloody lens cap on, or I forgot to put my light pollution filter in. Just things like that. It's so easy to make a mistake. I forgot what I was talking about. Yeah, but get hands on, and the more you do it, it'll become muscle memory and you won't make as many mistakes. There's only so much theory you can do, but doing it in practice really kind of instills it into your mind. So yeah, local astronomy clubs. If you're finding it difficult, honestly, if you reach out to your local astronomy club, they're basically places that are just full of people that just love helping beginners. It's one of the biggest parts of the hobby, is the enjoyment of helping others. So you can't go wrong joining a local astronomy club. You'll get all the help you need and you'll get shown how to do things. Forums are good, but you do get keyboard warriors sometimes that like to show off and things like that, and they can have quite high standards with things that can put people off. So I think people are less inclined to behave like that in the flesh, face to face. People do behave a little bit different on the internet, I find. I've spent a lot of time on forums over the years, and most of the advice is amazing, but also just don't take it as gospel, because sometimes people will just like parrot repeat what someone else has said without doing it for themselves as well. So I would recommend speaking to a friend who's done astrophotography, or getting in touch with a club, something like that. I think that's a better approach if you can do it. But nothing wrong with forums. You can learn. I learned most of everything I know from forums, but you do have to kind of like choose. You have to be picky about what information you choose to digest. I find a bit more on forums. I think I'm going to leave it there and stop rambling on. This has all just been one take. I think I might just go with that. It's Sunday afternoon, it's raining outside, and I just wanted to do something, kind of a helpful video. I know there's going to be better videos out there that have been researched more thoroughly, but I do work on a help desk, and I do for astronomy and astrophotography, answering questions, beginner questions, and I have been in the hobby for a long time, and I've even got a degree in astronomy, so I should know something. But yeah, I'm open to criticism. Put it in the comments if you've got any tips of your own that it would be helpful for everyone to read them. Big thank you to my patrons and channel members. As always, you guys are stars for helping support the channel, and I'll see you guys on the next video.